Hello, everybody, and welcome to another spicy, scintillating episode of the Chocolate Bros podcast. Here with who are you? You're Brian. I'm Adam.
Brian.
Yeah, we've been kind of in a daze the last few days, bro. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed myself in it being in a daze, as much as you can notice yourself being in a daze when you're in a daze and not noticing things very well. But we're gonna try to make it scintillating and,
and
it's always spicy. It's always spicy.
It's always going to be spicy. Anytime you get us together, it's always going to be spicy. So yeah, you're on with Brian and Adam. We are two of the three owners of the chocolate company, Fortunato Chocolate. You can check us out on fortunatochocolate.com.
Arguably the two least important. Like, I don't know, Dan might be like he's kind of the top dog. So like, you're kind of getting the scraps over here, don't you think? Or maybe not. I don't know. It depends on people's perceptions, I guess. They say perception is reality. Adam, what do you think about that?
I wrote a marketing email where I described us, the three of us, as a three-headed beast. And then in the email I said, I really got to choose a different analogy for describing us. But for the sake of this podcast, we're a three-headed beast, Brian.
Three-headed beast.
And hey, when you got a three-headed beast, one head of that beast doesn't eat unless the other two heads are eaten, because otherwise they'll start biting each other.
Ah, that's a great point. So what you're saying is that we're three co-equal heads, so they're getting a solid 2/3 representation.
Yeah. Because
right.
if only one head of a three-headed beast starts eating, then the other two will start kind of snipping at the neck of the one head that is eating.
But doesn't the beast share a gastrointestinal system? Like, doesn't all the heads?
But what about the taste buds and the enjoyment of tasting the food?
You're saying it's not necessarily a sustenance issue. It's more like it's a social thing.
It's a social thing.
Okay.
And it's the same. Yeah. And it's the same with the ownership of our company. Everybody's got to pull their weight. You see how that analogy holds up. It works.
Absolutely. I'm not going to quibble. I'm in too much of a daze to even quibble, bro.
Yeah. So I wanted to shout out a guy who came into our shop, bro. I didn't even tell you this story yet. There's a gentleman who came into our shop. I'm going to look up his name. His son wanted to know how M&Ms were made. They went onto YouTube to see how that happens. Somehow they came across the Chocolate Bros on YouTube by coincidence, by accident, heard us mention Issaquah, Washington, looked us up and came into the shop, and he brought his sister as well. They found us through the Chocolate Bros podcast.
Wow.
All right, I'm gonna look up his
amazing
name.
So he was trying to find out about M&Ms, the most industrial supermarket chocolate product there is, and instead came across Fortunato Chocolate and the Chocolate Bros and came into the store and got something.
I'm gonna shout out my man.
That's amazing.
Here's my man Daniel. I'm shouting you out, Daniel Church.
Danny the Churchmeister, so Danny C.
Check out how good of a father this guy is. He and his son like listen to some kind of an educational podcast or video every night together while he's putting his son to bed. And one of those was the Chocolate Bros podcast. And then he called his sister. They're both like Issaquah natives. This guy has lived in the country of Georgia, like the Republic of Georgia. His sister, who also came in, lived in Switzerland.
Wow.
But she pronounced it Schweiz, Switzerland, not Schweiz. So okay. I don't know if you're getting it wrong or if she's wrong.
I have heard it pronounced Schweiz by Swiss people in Switzerland. So maybe she might be thinking about a different place.
All right. So Daniel Church, rock solid, awesome customer and good father, and a dude who found out about
by the way, I really appreciate everything this guy did, but I absolutely am not. I'm not with him. His fathering's too good. I mean, how am I?
He's making us look bad.
He's making me look bad over here. Like, I don't approve of that. But still, good job. Good job.
Here's why I say we've been in a little bit of a daze, and why, in particular, I've been a little bit beleaguered, and so has the team over at the shop. Yes. I don't want to brag, but we're local news celebrities now.
Well, brag away. It's not bragging if you've done it. That's what I remember Bush saying. It's not bragging if you've done it.
Well, if the thing that you've done was like have a 1-minute segment on local news, I don't know if that's like
you're selling yourself wildly short, bro. You're selling yourself 67% short, because I happen to know that was a 3-minute segment on the local news. No, it wasn't the local news though. It was the local news magazine.
Yeah, but they took the same segment and showed it on the news the next day.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, but that show evenings. If anybody's listening to this and you're not in the Seattle area, Google Issaquah Fortunato Chocolate, and then maybe the words King and the number 5, the word King and the number 5.
King 5 evenings. Yes.
Yeah, and check us out. So a ton of people saw that and came into the shop. So local news and the local news magazine,
Yes.
those are still way more popular than I suspected.
They have so much reach. So by the way, at the gym, I had two people who I see at the gym and really never talk to come up to me and say, "Hey, you're that chocolate guy." And I'm wearing a mask at the gym. And then my tennis partner, Billy Numbers, on Saturday sent me a text before I saw him on Saturday, said, "Oh my gosh, I saw your segment on the news." It turns out he watches King 5 evenings and saw us on there. I never mentioned it to him.
It was a cool
He wanted
show.
to know all about it. I can't believe Anna saw it. People see this show. It's just unbelievable.
And honestly, tons of people came into the store. Hundreds and hundreds of people came into the store.
Yes.
It was really something, man.
The scene of us receiving a huge chocolate shipment while our store was thronged with people who the evening before had seen us on the evening news will stand out in my mind for quite some time.
And this little kitchen that we have in our store where we're making where we're making new products. And Daniel, so I think Daniel subscribed to our YouTube channel, so he's going to hear this.
Oh, fantastic! Well, by the way, before we go any further, Daniel, thank you so much for coming.
You're the man.
Thank you so much for educating your son about chocolate, both industrial and sort of artisanal. And we just love the fact that you're interested in coming in and come, guy, get your hot chocolate and see us anytime. We love.
And he brought his boy in too, and his boy had a hot chocolate as well.
How old is his son?
I think his son, if I remember, was 10.
10 years old.
He was cool too.
Getting into the good stuff. I think
I remember him being 10.
That's great. So he and his sister are currently Issaquanians. We've gone through this before, but Issaquah residents.
And they're chocolate lovers too, and they're supporters of local business. So they're good on pretty much every front that I can think of.
These are some good folks.
They are good folks.
Quality folks.
And so that little kitchen that we have where we make other products.
Yes.
We just built it, I want to say 2.5 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago. Like the stuff in that kitchen literally just showed up. Like
we still have the huge shelving units just to keep supplies properly stored that we haven't even had time to set up yet. They're sitting on the floor in boxes, 300-pound boxes.
So we had just started making products to put on the shelves, and this new show ran, and like we haven't even practiced really making stuff. We certainly have never made it on a large scale. And then all of a sudden we had to start just pumping out like nonstop product for these hundreds of people that were coming in.
You mentioned the product that is probably the most laborious to make on the show. You specifically called out our turtles on the show.
Yeah.
A product that is incredibly inefficient to make, super hard to make in high volume, and not available for online, and very, very hard to keep in stock in the store. Since you mentioned that on that local news show, I've gotten probably 50 emails asking about the turtles, and I know that folks are coming into the shop, and as soon as there's turtles on the shelf, they just buy them all up.
Yeah.
And by the way, the turtles are amazing.
They're amazing.
When we can produce enough to put them online, we will, and the folks are going to absolutely love them.
So we make caramel in the shop. Javier, who's great.
Now that's Fred, that you guys buy caramel beans, right? And you actually put them in the soil in the shop, grow them in the caramel planters, and then lovingly harvest the caramel pods, and then squeeze the caramel out of the caramel pod.
That's essentially right.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but there's a couple of little tweaks to make to that explanation, but that's basically right. But the one thing I will say is that the caramel that we use in the shop, we're using honey instead of corn syrup, which was
that corn syrup is gross. That's a great point.
Javier dude came up with that.
That's amazing.
So but we just have these two little burners. Like we don't have like a big.
Yeah, it's like these are the burners that I had. I think I had one of these like in 1987 in my.
Yeah, it's a little camping burner is what we have in there.
Yeah, like in my barracks room in the army, so that I could heat up top ramen.
Yeah, that's what we have. But we make it fresh and stuff. But so we were just like trying to pump out turtles and just everything, and then we did like a little sample plate on the show with like one of each of our products. And literally people were coming in and saying like, I saw X, Y,
I want the sample
on the plate. I want the stuff that was on the plate. We sold 1 million bags of s'mores. Like we're just pumping out s'mores. And as soon as we put them on the shelves, they disappear. And everybody was just last week, just run ragged. I mean, we were really working 13, 14 hours a day last week. So that's why I had been in a little bit of a daze, but we're starting to recover now. man, our team over there in the shop are just a bunch of blue-blooded champions, dude.
If I
They are
if I could
champions.
sing, I would use my singing abilities to sing the praises of our
Uh-huh.
crew over at the shop because they are stellar. I mean, I
Yeah,
got to
they're the
tell you,
best.
I got a stellar crew working in Peru on picking up, harvesting, picking up, and fermenting and drying beans. And the crew we've got going at the shop now,
They're awesome.
they're awesome. And so shout out to another wonderful person who not from here but now living here, your wife Neri, who large part has organized some of the has sort of organized the labor situation over there. Man, oh man, what a great team. What a great team of
Great,
hardworking, smart,
great
competent,
team.
wonderful people.
And another shout out for Neri.
Mhm.
So she, along with her brother, who lives in Bolivia and is a graphic
Moises.
designer, Moises,
Yep.
who's a friend of yours as well.
Yes.
They work together to design all of our packaging.
Yes.
And we're gonna have like printed bags and biodegradable packaging and stuff, but they
Mhm.
haven't showed up yet.
Yeah.
So Neri during the last week also.
No, I'm going to send a nasty email, by the way, because if they just don't show up immediately, then I'm sending. No, it's a callback to something else. Never mind.
Yeah. That wasn't actually even on the podcast. We were talking about that before.
I know. That's why no one, that's not going to make sense to anybody.
Yeah. But in addition to that, like Neri was over at FedEx every day last week, printing hundreds of labels.
I thought you were going to say yelling at the FedEx people because they haven't arrived.
They didn't hear that conversation, Brian. People don't know what
Okay.
you're referring to.
All right.
Yeah. All right, we had a customer who placed an order and then gave us a really hard time.
Very quickly, very unreasonably quickly sent a mean email castigating us for providing a poor customer experience when it was well within the realm of normal for the product to be in the active.
It was fair. Yeah, he was being unfair.
He was.
So everybody worked real hard. We made it through a little pretty worn down, a little run down. But we made it through. And I think when you go through something kind of hard like that as a team and you find a way to power through,
it's team building.
It bonds you, man.
Absolutely.
Suffering together bonds you for sure.
That's true. I remember that when we would have, there was a couple of years there where like every pickup that we were doing in Campo was our new record. We did, 1,400 kilos. And then it was, we made 2 tons in one day of wet beans. And then we got all the way up to like over 5 and it increased by a factor of
in one day, 5 tons of wet cacao.
And one bean, which we've now smashed. We've done 7 or 8 now, but at the time we didn't have anywhere near the capacity to handle that. And we worked from 7:30 a.m. until 11 at night that night because they have to go in the fermenter box that day. And we were absolutely wrung out, but in the good way. And we, at about 7 o'clock, we sent someone over to talk to one of the local restaurants and put us together like a bunch of dinners. And we all had dinner together there at the plant late. And we had a couple of beers to toast our success. And we were wrung out, but happy and more unified than ever as a team.
Same deal. And like, so on one of these nights, we went and bought tamales for everybody and sent everybody home with tamales for dinner. And then the next night we had pizza and stuff. So it was same kind of deal. But man, are those guys champs, dude. So
I agree and cannot sing their praises loudly enough.
All right. So going back to what you were just talking about the record pickups and stuff, we're here in February. We're early in the 2020 cacao harvest season.
Right. We're on the front end of it. The rain pattern this year dictated that things start a little, sometimes you start in December. The production wasn't great in December, and there were some restrictions on movement due to the surge in Omicron. So right now we're really getting deeply into the swing of it, a little like a month later than we might normally.
So how many harvests have you overseen now? Or is this your 11th or 12th or something like that, or more?
Yeah, in terms of I thought you meant individual harvest days, which would be.
Oh no, I'm talking about like how many like full cacao harvest seasons have you overseen now?
I believe our first year that we had a really active harvest, I mean, I could look it up, but I'd say it was probably 2009 or 9 going into 10.
All right.
So it's been.
So this is like your 13th year.
This is 21 going into 22. So this would be the 12th year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what has to happen at the beginning of what has to happen at the end of the previous harvest season to get yourself ready for the next harvest season? First of all.
So we're in the unfortunate position that because it's such a seasonal, it's a crop and it doesn't produce year round. So you have to kind of shutter your facility for a few months every year. and it's not really in use. So if anybody out there has industrial sort of experience, you're running a factory. Basically, this is a bean factory, and so factories require a lot of maintenance and a lot of construction and a lot of cleanup and a lot of planning and this and that. So
and you're like throwing a lot of weight at your equipment, man. Like if you're doing 8 tons in a day, like you're putting a lot of weight on your infrastructure there.
that's correct. So yeah, 8 tons in a day is 18,000 pounds, almost 17 something ton. Yeah, almost 18,000 pounds of 18,000 pounds of anything is a lot. And this is all handmade, hand built.
And that's every day. Yeah, and everything's made out of wood.
Yes. So, which is great actually, because wood is quite resistant to weight. But so at the end of the previous harvest, the number one thing you got to do after everybody takes a few days to recoup is take a thorough inventory of what needs fixing and what needs replacing, and come up with a list and then put together a budget. And every year before things start, you have to put together a construction plan. You might need to expand. You don't really ever contract. You got to replace mesh and tarps and slats of wood and supports and under supports and fencing. There you got to repave. I mean, I think I've mentioned on here
repaving is pretty interesting, dude.
It's because so the fresh cacao juice drips down out of the fermenter boxes and it drips down onto this polished concrete surface, and it just eats concrete.
It's acidic, huh?
It literally eats concrete, the chemistry of it, it'll eat it away. And so every year, typically you have to bring in a jackhammer and you have to jackhammer a section, the one that's the most worn of concrete, and relay that section of concrete.
Every year.
Almost every year we would have to do one. It kind of goes in a rotating cycle of replacement. You might want to you might have identified a pain point in your process, and you might put a new ramp in or a second ramp on the other end, or
and all the fermenting has to be done on top of concrete.
It doesn't have to, but if you do it on top of the soil, then that stuff gets into the soil and it'll rot eventually. And it's
harder to clean. Yeah, harder to clean.
Can't really. Yeah, you start to get odor issues, and so for drainage reasons and for sanitary reasons, it's a lot better to do it on concrete. Be awesome to do it on tile actually, but tile is not. Tile would be great, but it also the cacao juice eats tile grout. So you'd have to do a lot more, where you'd have to replace your substructure and all your tile every however many years, and that would be a big project,
bro. So early in the cacao harvest, is the fruit generally less ripe or anything like that? Or like, are there any differences in the fruit early in the harvest versus late in the harvest from your experience?
I always felt so. Yeah, once you get your plant ready to go and you got your team reassembled,
a
lot of them have gone off to do other work and so forth, and you're calling them back and seeing who wants to work, and then you're hiring new people and getting them trained up. Make sure you got all your bags. You got to get your motorcycles maintained. You got a fleet of 6, 7, 8 motorcycles. Got a truck. You got to get all your stuff maintained. Change tires. Change out wiring harnesses, new, gear, new
oil changes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
the whole deal. Some are out. You got to take them in for a complete rehaul. So yeah, you get all your vehicles done. You get your team ready to go. Everybody's trained up. You got all your bags, buckets, everything you need, and then you got to start programming these pickups with the communities. So you have to actually go out and you have to see how it's going in each community, and you have to schedule a day, which means normally you have to get together and sit down for a couple of hours.
And how many little communities are we buying from?
30.
Yeah, and I know there's like 80 total out there, but
we buy principally from about 30 of them, and a lot of those are a pickup of one day might incorporate 3 to 5 small communities, and it's on a rotating cycle of 6 or 7 pickups. So normally once every 2 weeks, you have to go out and start scheduling and make sure that your calendar is correct, and that everybody, and you have to take into account the cycle of the moon, because farmers don't like to harvest on
I remember that.
The Luna Verde. They don't like to harvest right after anyhow. I've talked to some agronomists who have assured me that that's a bunch of nonsense. But then again, farmers know things from practice that
correct.
Book learning often doesn't.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's a scheduling hassle, but there you go.
And so in the off season, are you going out and when you visit those farms, is it just to make sure that our relationships are still strong, that they're still going to be selling to us, or is it to go see?
Also see how production looks, talk about the rain, see how.
Talk about scheduling.
make sure the status of their pruning, make sure that there's not a disease problem that needs to be addressed. If so, then you might need to send some folks out there to help them get their farm into shape, because disease this is in this day of pandemic, this is pertinent. Disease in one little cacao plot, these are airborne diseases. The number one disease is called moniliasis, and it's and there's also Phytophthora, and these are airborne spore diseases. You get a black spot in your cacao pod, and then little white spores, and a wind comes up and it takes these spores and they disseminate out potentially to the next farm and the next farm and the next farm.
And the way to protect against that is proper pruning, or
prune. So you have to prune to make sure there's good airflow, and then if you see any diseased pods, you have to get them down off the tree before they spore, and either burn them, bury them, or drown them in the river.
Bro, you mentioned the rain pattern affecting the start of the harvest season.
These are not irrigated farms, so rain is everything.
Okay, so is it like a lack of rain?
It can be a lack of rain. It could be too much rain. It could be rain in the wrong. Let me tell you something about rain, Adam.
Tell me about rain as it pertains to the cacao harvest, bro.
Boy, oh boy, farmers, they're at the mercy of the most uncontrollable element of all. I mean, sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't. I can't remember one year where everybody got their heads together and said, boy, the rain was perfect this year. No, it does not happen. It's always too much or too little, or in the wrong time, at the wrong time, or, I mean, what you'd really like is a gentle, small drop, steady, predictable rain, every night for a certain amount of months, or 2 nights a week, and then dry to water stress the plants to increase their production. Like, there could be a perfect pattern. And if you had the money to lay in irrigation, drip irrigation systems, you could do that. But then again, that doesn't protect from too much rain, because we're always fundraising for flood relief. So, there's either too much or too little, or the wrong, whatever. There's never a year. There are years that are better and years that are worse, but there's never a year where everybody gets together and says, boy, the rain really crushed it this last season.
The most common message I ever get from Oscar with pictures, it's like, estamos full lluvia acá. Like, it's like, hey, we got full blown rain happening.
It's storming. The roads are closed. The bridge is out. Always the bridge is out. The river, the mud. I mean, I'm ruined for mud, man.
You hate it.
The rain and the mud. It rains a lot here in Seattle, but not like that.
No. Our roads aren't primarily dirt roads or anything, so
it's pernicious there. I mean, it's rainy, it's muddy, it's floody, it's hard to get around, and it's just slippery and dirty, and it's just all the things you don't want it to be.
So generally, bro, at the beginning of the harvest, what's it like when
you asked about the trees? So in my experience, because you have a dry season, and then it starts to get, the dry season is when they flower, and then the rain starts, and that rain kind of feeds the process, and the trees start to throw fruit from inside the little flowers, and then a certain amount of those are vigorous and grow. In my experience, the beans at the beginning of the year are a little less meaty, and the pods are a little smaller, but I think there might be a little more flavor in those beans, because there's kind of like less meat to fill with the available flavor chemicals. I don't know, but I would say that the early harvest beans are maybe a little bit stronger flavored, but a little bit less, a little bit harder to process, and a little bit less meaty, less full, less average grams per bean. In the cacao industry, you want to average 1 gram per dry bean. That's considered a good size bean to have, and a good weight bean to have. I'd say they're probably more like 0.9 at the beginning, and they probably get up to like 1.2 at the heavy part of the harvest. So
what's it like when you go do your very first harvest of the season?
Yeah, so it's always it's
Is
like
it-
the first it's like the
It's like
first
the
day of
first game
baseball
of a,
season.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
It's
the first
opening,
game
it's
of,
opening day. Everybody's happy to see you, and the farmers are very solicitous and they want you to come in. Everybody's a little rusty. Someone will invariably crash their motorcycle on day one.
good
And
times, dude.
oh yeah, somebody will inevitably crash their motorcycle and hurt their knee or something, and they'll be gimping around for the next couple of weeks. And you don't like to see that, but it definitely happens.
And are the cacao farm?
They'll be riding and they'll like have the guy who's two up on the back they're like they will have done the maintenance but forgotten to put the little foot post, and so they'll have their leg hanging down the whole day, and they'll put their leg up against the tailpipe without realizing it, and they'll like burn a hole in their pants and actually burn their skin, and then everybody will give them the business for the next couple of weeks because they're gimpy and they have a hole in their pants, and they'll call him like Mr. Pants Hole Guy.
That's like a very Peruvian
Yeah.
way to make fun of someone, is to
That's
just
right.
call them the thing they are.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
like,
So,
yeah. And are the cacao farmers stoked to like start getting some money coming in again?
Absolutely. So the great thing is the school year ends in December in Peru, just before Christmas, and it starts typically around March 1st. And so when we start harvesting cacao, the farmers start to get cash income on a yearly harvest, and it comes right at the time that they need to buy school supplies and school uniforms, and pay. So in Peru, the way it works is they put out a list, and it's an extensive list. It's an extensive and expensive list of things you need to buy, which has to be delivered before they'll let your kid into class. Even though they're public schools, a lot of times they charge the parents for certain things. The teachers may charge for certain things. You have to, like, the parents have to communally supply all the toilet paper for the schools there. The state doesn't do that, even though they're public schools. In some places, there's outright graft going on in the school, so it can end up being very expensive. And all schools, 100% of all schools in Peru are uniformed, and you have to buy the particular uniforms. You can only buy them from the school, and because they're all monogrammed and logoed and stuff. And so all that stuff starts to really add up. So starting to get some cash rolling in it's perfect timing for them.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah.
And what about, like, are you keeping an eye on your buying prices in the off season as well? And
Well, so because cacao is scarce in the off season, the price is typically at its highest right at the beginning. So financing wise, that makes it a challenge, obviously, and it's great for the farmers. And so that as beans start to come into the market, the price will typically drop. I think we've discussed it before. Our model that we use is basically we take the local price. Our price floats based on the local middleman price. The local middlemen are paying X amount. We pay X times 1.3 or something like that.
but for what cacao?
Well, see, they'll take anything, but
Yeah.
we only take pure national cacao, and it has to be, clean and disease free. So if they were able to sell, well, I won't go through the calculation, but we end up paying 42% more on average than what they can get from any other alternative when you take into account the cost of processing, the cost of transport, which we take all those costs, the time value of money where they have to wait, and just the outright higher price that we pay.
Yep.
So our price, we don't really just set the price.
But it floats, and it's 42% higher than any other price they could possibly get.
Over time, it has averaged out to be 42% higher than any other price they could have gotten there locally. Yes.
Yeah, very cool. And
so of course they're happy to see us and also some years it's even more important than others because the price of coffee is even more wildly volatile than the price of cacao. And most of these guys are coffee farmers and rice farmers. Rice is not highly profitable. Rice is a thin margin for a farmer. So rice
and it's such hard work.
Oh boy,
rice farming is so gnarly, man.
Honestly, that's one reason they love cacao, because harvesting cacao is easier than harvesting coffee, and anything's easier than rice. Just generally rice and you have to pay for so many. So Adam, I apologize for interrupting the podcast, but you can't see it because we're in different offices, but the UPS truck just pulled up and he's about to knock on the door of the office that you're in.
Yeah.
So why don't you open the door and receive this while I tell people about
all right, keep going, bro. Keep going. Yeah.
So cacao prices are more stable, typically operate within a thinner range than coffee and rice prices. Rice tends to be a little bit more variable, and it floats up and down. And on a year when rice prices are low, and sometimes that coincides with a year when coffee prices are low. If both rice and coffee prices are low and the cacao price is doing great, it's a much needed infusion of cash. And in some cases, a farmer will kind of like when they know cacao season is coming and we've scheduled, and if they can see that the coffee price is low and there's too much coffee on the market, the fact that we're harvesting and paying for cacao allows them to sit on some coffee and kind of wait out that price fluctuation and hold it in reserve because they're getting their cacao money in. Rice is always low margin. It just kind of pays the bills, but boy,
you can fill up some
labor.
land. You can fill up some land with it, and like my understanding with rice is you can plant rice and then harvest it the same year, whereas a cacao tree takes several years to come online.
That's right. You can plan and know when you're going to get rice income, but the big problem with the rice is for the farmer, rice requires irrigation. It requires like 22,000 acre feet of water per hectare. It's not acre feet, that's too much, but I mean it's a huge amount of water.
You gotta like hire other guys to come over and help you, man.
And labor is super short. Yeah, and you have to buy all the chemical inputs. You have to buy fertilizer and you have to buy pesticides for rice, or it just won't grow. So they have to have all that cash to front to get into rice, and so then it's a diabolical cycle.
In the off season, do you have cacao farmers come in and just like asking for an advance against the harvest for any kind of bills they have? I mean, is that a common thing?
Now, Adam, can you tell me, are there any agents of the Peruvian government listening to this podcast? Because what I'm about to say may not exactly square with all the regulatory.
This is not us that did this, Brian. I'm just saying generally.
Oh, you're saying if hypothetically, yes, hypothetically speaking, lots of farmers, dozens of farmers could potentially, hypothetically, go in and ask for an advance against next year's beans.
And in theory, we might do that for them.
Theoretically, there could be an informal practice of loaning money against the next year's and really just keeping it in a notebook and not having it be any sort of formal regulated program, because that would be essentially impossible to do and it would make it so expensive as to be prohibitive. So yes, in concept, that could potentially happen all the time.
Every year for over a decade, in theory.
Conceptually, sure. And that happens because life happens. Like theoretically, people could have medical issues. Theoretically, they could be having a kid get married. Theoretically, they could need to invest in. They could want to expand their foothold into cattle and wanted to get some breeding stock or something like that. So it would be very common in theory for a farmer to ask for funds for some special purpose and then repay in beans later.
Yeah, and let me just say a couple things about that. So one, anybody who's listening to this who's a business owner knows like sometimes you need credit to grow your business, and essentially all of our cacao farm partners are small business owners. They're family farms, and
the most successful ones realize that and treat it as such. But many don't.
Yeah, well, but the other thing then is also we're talking about people in many cases who are at a very bare subsistence level of living, and any kind of surprise will put them in a financial hardship.
And their family economy is entirely informal. They don't have access to credit, and so that's why
it's not they're using online banking or something like this.
No, sir, they cannot. I mean, they've got a national ID card, but they can't go to a financial institution and get credit. And this is a cash transaction. The hardest part of the work that I did for many, many years in the jungle was making these cash off-book purchases, getting them into the accounting system. And so they have a form for that. This is a known issue in Peru. They have a form for this. And you have to fill out by hand a form for each cash transaction and then submit that to the tax authority. And then that shows that the beans were actually purchased and you get credit for the expense. And that gives you the legal right to then resell the beans and export the beans. If you don't do that, then they're not in the system, and you can't.
So
the state would have no way of knowing that you were the owner of those beans to be able to export.
So your little receipts got to total up to the amount that you're exporting in theory if you were to get audited. Yeah, we do. The people want to know, Brian.
Do we have 500 hours so that I can expound on my endless? I'm getting exhausted and my hand is cramping up just thinking of this.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have a hard out here pretty soon anyways, bro. So, but listen, we have.
Well, good. So let me take the rest of the time to talk about filling out these.
No, we've got a hard out right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're just starting the new harvest. We're making all of our plans to start buying.
But it's on, by the way. We're already on harvest 3 of this harvest year.
Yeah. So we're already on harvest. So we've done 3 harvests. So we're going to be buying a lot of cacao.
A bunch of cacao, tons and tons of cacao.
And we're going to be making a lot of chocolate. It's pretty interesting, this chocolate that we have in the store. We got a friend. I don't even think you know her. Do you know Kim Peterson?
Maybe. I'm terrible with names. If I saw her face, I might be able to pick her
She's a customer and a friend, and she loves the 47% dark milk. She's a huge.
She should. Everybody
fan.
Should. That's my favorite.
She tested the previous batch of 47% dark milk we had versus the shipment that we just got in.
Yes.
And she said she was able to taste a little bit of a difference, and she likes the new batch better.
I love to hear
that. So the other thing is like, hey man, like the environment, the terroir, the yeast in the air.
I'm sorry,
the rain, the terroir.
The terroir. Noted Frenchophile, noted Francophile, Adam Pearson.
You always say it like that, so I try to say it like that. How do you say it?
Terroir.
Terroir.
I'm not sure I say it like someone from Montreal who's had like too much poutine.
Do you remember the movie The Princess Bride, where in the scene where the guy's married? Marriage. Marriage is what brings us all here together. Terroir. Yeah. That also reminds me of a scene from the movie Karate Kid Part 3. Where Mr. Miyagi,
that miraculous sequel, yes.
So Mr. Miyagi comes in and he's gonna fight these 2 like American karate guys who are the Cobra Kai guys, and it's Mr. Miyagi versus these 2 guys, and right before they're gonna start fighting him, they start doing all these Bruce Lee noises. They're like, oh, right? So like, and then Mr. Miyagi beats them both up. And they're both on the ground all beat up and like, and then the last thing that Mr. Miyagi does is he goes, whoa, whoa, like making fun of them. And
that's funny.
Whoa. Yeah. So, all right. But anyway,
but you're right. It varies year by year.
It will.
We've had a couple years that were notably not as. It's the same with vintners. Wine.
It's been a long time since we've had a bad year.
Yeah, it has. We've been fortunate. We are fortunate that the weather, even though we're talking about how variable and sometimes problematic it can be, tends to do a great job. These trees are adapted to it, and the trees and the genetic stock are good. And not every farmer is the same, but the vast majority of the farmers we work with are good, solid farmers who know how to put out a good bean.
Yeah. So one of the fun things for the customers, for our wonderful customers who are listening, will be also to just kind of get to try new chocolate every year. And even within the same harvest, you have different shipments of cacao coming out of the jungle that could each have their own character, even though it's the same chocolate.
We have at least one client that I know of who actually only buys chocolate made from the first beans of every year, calls it first harvest, and really appreciates that flavor. He's got an amazing palate and can discern it. It is, it's much like wine. This is a product that changes year to year and is specific to the place, the wind, the sun, the rain, everything, the soil, everything that makes up the terroir of a place. It happens just as much terroir. It happens just as much in cacao as it does in coffee or wine or anything else.
All right, man. Well, hey, let's wrap it up right there. Let me just quickly look up. It's Daniel Church. Shout out again to Daniel Church, man. And I hope you're listening to this with your son. And I hope we see you in the shop for a free hot chocolate sometime soon. And just thank you to everybody else. Brian, we're over 5,000, or we're over 1,000 5-star reviews on our 68% chocolate.
That's right. We passed 1,000 5-star reviews. What an amazing milestone. I in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have thought that would happen. So yeah, I just want to double thank Daniel and his son and everybody who listens, our good friend David, and just everybody involved and our crew over there, and also the whole crew in Peru. They won't hear this, but I tell them every time I talk to them how much we appreciate them. But thank you to all the customers. This is all about you guys helping us
We're all
stay in
one.
business by helping us stay alive by coming in and buying that good stuff.
I've written a little bit about this lately, but I don't think it's appreciated to the extent to which it's crazy that it isn't. But I don't think enough businesses recognize the extent to which the customers are basically partners in the they're basically the financial partners in the business.
Yeah.
Because like nothing we do would be possible unless we had customers who enjoyed the chocolate. So thank you all. Like we couldn't do it without you. Brian, you want to go ahead and sign us off with the Fortunato jingle, which we're still doing?
Fortunato yum.
Fortunato yum, with the little happy fingers there.
That's right.
And everybody, don't forget to check us out at fortunatochocolate.com, or if you live in the Seattle area, come check us out. You can Google Fortunato Chocolate Issaquah. We got the address on the website as well. So we look forward to seeing you, and thank you everybody so much.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Check you later.